All right, everybody, let's just all sit in one of the circles that have been set up for you. Every group should have one handout. And before we get started, I also recommend every group pick a leader. Towards the end of the presentation, there will be, after the end of the initial conversation that I'm going to do, there is going to be an opportunity for every group to present. That is what like the leaders are for. So every group should pick one leader. And right. I think this has been. And yeah, I think initially let's sit facing the screen so that we can, change that arrangement a little bit in a minute. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Karthik. I am the Managing Director of Fish Welfare Initiative India. Today, I'm going to initially talk about what the work we do and what inspired our work, essentially. Contrary to what a lot of analogs have done in India, what we've done is we've actually picked our inspiration from many of the local organizations, the livelihoods organizations, the sustainable ag organizations, and we've very initially decided to work with producers directly. I know there are a few Indian orgs who have taken a similar path, and Indian animal orgs which have taken a similar path. And I believe that for countries like India, where the market is mostly informal, that would be the right approach, essentially. So with that in mind, this workshop is aimed at essentially bringing together perspectives from that journey and also add more perspectives through the handout that you've been given, basically. And the idea is that you use the handouts after the presentation to kind of go through it and come up with your own formulation of how you would be inspired by local organizations as opposed to Western-style activism, which is very important to be inspired by, but only that could cause trouble because it doesn't have a lot of purchase in countries like India, and that could be trouble. So let's just going through how this session would go. The first 15 minutes would be me kind of talking through our experience in India about setting up FWI, and then we'd have 5 minutes to kind of work out how we're going to do the presentation as an individual group, basically. And then the other 10 minutes, the next 10 minutes will be about picking up those pieces, which will help you make the presentation. The last 30 minutes will be for each group to pick a leader, and for that leader to come out here and do a small talk on what they've learned and how they would do things, basically, right? So that's how this is going to work. So this is a workshop, so I'm going to make you all work a little bit. All right, let's get started. All right, now, these are the most common problems that you're likely to encounter as an animal organization in an informal economy, functioning in an informal economy. The supply chains are ridiculously complex. When we started FWI, we went to Compass Group in Sodexo, like everybody advised us to do, and they didn't know anything about where their fish came from. There were 7 other companies between them and their fish producers. They didn't know where their fish producers were. They didn't even know their fish came from Andhra, where we were working. And this is just one example, one of many examples of how complex supply chains can get. And these supply chains, as you can imagine, when you try to do advocacy from the side of the consumers, these supply chains will come in the way, obviously. Because take the fish is eaten in the northeastern part of India, grown in the southern part of India. Now, they don't even speak the same language to communicate what their intentions are, how they would like their fish to be, higher welfare, and all those aspects can't be communicated to the people in the south. They don't speak the same language. There's too many middlemen in between. And the consumer awareness is not that great. When it comes to animals, the complexity of the dialogue and philosophy around this is not mature to a point where we can rely on it to change the market theme, basically. Then the behavior change incentives are not cut and dry. You think that a market incentive will change things? You think that, oh, if I give a producer a higher margin on what they're producing, or sell their produce at a premium price, this will change things. But he might not be able to find the labor all of a sudden to actually do the production changes that he needs to do, because the skill level of the labor could be really low in the region he's functioning in. So what incentives work is also a complex question. It hasn't been figured out all that well. The government institutions and other institutions, research organizations, universities, are very difficult to work with. I know a tiresome process we underwent recently where we had to get ethics approval. A signature on a single piece of document took over 2 months to get. Had to go through so many irritating people, honestly speaking. 3 months. The person who was working on it says it's 3 months, basically. And caused many nightmares, basically. Simple things take a ridiculous amount of time. And lastly, we know that we have a lot of skilled people working in the animal space, but finding them, boy, oh boy, is that hard, right? Whenever we try to hire, it takes a minimum of 3 months. And that means prolonged timelines, and so many things change because of just that, basically, because of needing to find the right person, needing to train that person once they're hired, so on and so forth. And we're only learning from our Western counterparts. Corporate campaigns are great, but they might not work for us. They just simply might not work for us. In a country where maybe even 2% or 3% of egg consumption comes from corporations, and most of the consumption is from wet markets, meat consumption and egg consumption is from wet markets, and you're not going to have that much of an impact through corporate campaigns, basically. So what do you do in these situations, right? What should you get inspired by? So this has been our journey. I mean, FWI has been at it for 4 years in India, and we've helped 2.2 million fish, 1.4 million shrimp, and we've also recently had a great success. Bureau of Indian Standards has been given a bunch of recommendations from us, and they literally copy-pasted what we send them. It's been great to see them become standards of the country, honestly. So we've had some great successes. But a lot of this is because we were initially inspired by the other social movements or organizations that have been working in this space for a very long time. We didn't really think about, we tried the corporate route, did some corporate engagement initially, but we very quickly decided that that was not going to be working out for us. The part that did work out for us was the inspiration that was drawn from self-help groups, which are organizations that have initially come together to help women in rural parts of India to do microfinance, but this has morphed into something very different over the years, basically. We have farmer-producer companies, which are essentially self-help groups, where clusters of farmers improve their negotiation capacity by coming together, right? And we've also had sustainable agriculture organizations, which are led by scientists of many stripes in the country. And these two groups have been major inspirations for us, basically. Now, rice producers in the country are one of the, our agrarian crisis is pretty major. Rice producers commit suicide, I think, fairly commonly after cotton producers. And if you look at the impact that the SHG system was able to get for rice producers, they've taken their profit margins from 10 to 25% up to 30 to 50%. And rice supply chains are complex. Just like I spoke about fish supply chains being complex, rice supply chains are complex. There's a bunch of middlemen. What they've done is they've taken out the middlemen. They've taken out the polishers of, they've said, we'll polish the rice ourselves, we will store it ourselves, and then we'll take it to market, basically. When you take this to a supply chain that's slightly smaller, fruit and vegetable producers, they've had even more success. 100% margins can be witnessed with fruit and veg producers, basically. And this is great. Imagine if you tell a producer, say whether it's a broiler chicken producer or a fish producer, that we are going to be able to increase your margins by these percentages. It is going to be one of those processes that people would sign on for, basically. That is extremely important to learn from, that how do they operate this system? What have been their successes, failures? Understanding how the minuscule details of their operations run is super important. Similarly, the sustainable ag space has had a lot of success as well. We're trying to shift things towards a more ethical direction here, reducing pesticide usage, because a lot of these pesticides are carcinogenic. They've caused many problems in both rural and urban India. Andhra Pradesh has seen a pesticide reduction in land use terms. 15 to 10% land that is under agriculture has reduced or stopped using pesticides, and that's incredible. The neighboring state has only been able to do 6 to 8%. The difference between the two states, the Andhra government was very much for doing this, whereas the Karnataka government, not so much. One simple thing, the government helping has been able to make a bigger push in a significant way. And the last state I'm going to talk about, Sikkim, is a 100% organic state. How have they been able to do it? The people were for it as well. They really imagined themselves as an organic state, basically. Now, the people were with this change, the government was with this change, and it happened, essentially. So if one day I do want to see, higher welfare fish reach these numbers, basically, I know it's going to be an intermediary step, but it's going to be a major step. If 10 to 15% of fish producers shift towards higher welfare practices, that is a dream. That is a dream come true in that moment, right? So these are the successes that inspired me in many ways. And I'm going to delve into some of the operational details of how these organizations have been able to achieve these successes and how they've inspired us, basically. Now, the self-help groups have had a very strong leadership from the get-go. They've taken a lot of inspiring leaders. Most of these leaders are local leaders, basically. They're not urbanites who've come to villages and tried to transform things, but they've kind of come out of the space that the change needed to happen, and they quickly realized that financial support for the people around them was the main thing, basically. And this is something that a lot of orgs struggle away from. Everyone's been advised, don't give people money. But there's a good way of doing this. And that's what we need to study. People are not going to change without investment into that change, basically. And these are delicate communities. There's a lot of vulnerability in the communities we're trying to shift, especially in informal economies, basically. We're not trying to convert some rich farmer to do something different. More often than not, we're trying to ask a poor farmer to do something different. It means economic burdens that he might or she might not be able to withstand, basically. They've taken control of their supply chains, like I've said. They said, we'll polish our own rice. We'll, get our vegetables to market quality ourselves, basically. Cut out the middlemen as much as possible. And that's something that we need to figure out how to do as well. Fish currently has at least 6 to 8 middlemen operating in the system, basically. Cutting them out and increasing the margins of the producers is going to be an excellent way of delivering an intervention, basically. High levels of compliance. We've observed high levels of compliance with our work. This is because we've always had our ear to the ground, basically. Our team works on the ground, fastidiously in order to ensure that we understand what the farmers' needs are, and we cater our intervention to this. And this is why we've seen the success we've seen. We see over 90% compliance to the corrective actions we prescribe to the producers we have. And lastly, state support. Some state support is great, but the sustainable ag movement has been able to do a lot of state support because it has charismatic scientists who have gone out there and advocated for this change. And that has brought in a lot of state funding for it and brought a lot of financial stability to their movement. In many ways, the self-help movement has been subsumed within the sustainable ag movement in many ways, and they've together produced amazing results in this country, right? Now, once we get these little details, what we get is an organization that has taken all the good bits and left out all the bad bits, basically. They have unruly leadership. These are all the things that you shouldn't be doing. Again, very important to understand. learn from the mistakes of local organizations as well. It's not just enough to learn from what their strengths are, you have to learn from their mistakes. They don't treat their talent really well, right? My cousin still works. My cousin took over for me, lots of nepotism there, you can see. Took over for me at the last sustainable ag organization I work for. And it's been 4 years since she worked for them. She hasn't gotten a raise still. And we're very proud at FWI to be doing very differently. And that's something that needs to change. We have to have really good org structures and culture. And we shouldn't, the organization shouldn't experience a leadership deficit. All the leadership at FWI lives in Eluru at least 3 to 4 months of the year, basically. We understand what is going on the ground. We try to keep the organization as employee-friendly as possible. We try to understand the stakeholders we have so that we don't treat them poorly. At the end of the day, as I said, these are very vulnerable groups. We shouldn't take that fact for granted. We need to always keep an eye out for what could go wrong, basically. And even though these organizations have been able to achieve very limited scale in the self-help group section, the sustainable ag organizations have taken them national, basically. And that's the success I think we can replicate as well. Now, we still have problems. It's not like we're completely overcome all issues because we've learned from the failures of others. We still suffer from an inability to make behavior change happen at the pace we need it to happen, basically. Each recruitment cycle takes about 4 months, basically, for us. And institutional support is still pending in many ways. The government support is still pending. Supply chain issues persist. And cross-cultural communication is a big problem. Some of the members of the team are from other countries. Sometimes, we have gaps in understanding, and all that keeps happening all the time. But having said that, we didn't make the mistakes, that I learned from my previous job, and that's been a crucial element of how we've succeeded. Now that you've learned something about this, what I'm going to get you to do is to take a look at the case studies that I've given you. Elect a leader. It's best to have your leader go through the case study. And then what needs to happen is the rest of you need to focus on researching the topic and helping them kind of set up a pathway for you. So imagine an intervention. First step, imagine an intervention that you want to do in an informal economy. Second step, have your leader read the handouts. There's going to be case studies in there which have success stories from informal economies, specifically telling you about how much impact they've had, how they've had that impact, and what their failures look like, and how they've overcome those failures, basically. And you need to think about having one of those interventions yourself. And then once you've done all that, you come here and present what you've come up with. You take 5 minutes to present it. 4 things to think about when you're going through the case studies. Pick the case study that moves you the most. Pick a case study that is further along in the process than the intervention that you're imagining in your head, basically, so that there's a learning process that that can facilitate. And then also think about your ability to replicate that case study. Fair trade principles might not really work for the intervention you're thinking about. So look at the sustainable ag case study in that case. And lastly, you need to develop some working knowledge over the course of the next 10 minutes, probably 12, some working knowledge of what has happened. So each group has roughly 8 people, right? 1 leader and 7 people to do research. So I think you can do it. I think we can make this happen, basically. Let's do a quick, and I'm going to come down and help each group a little bit in the process. And then the stage is going to belong to the leaders of each group to come up with a little bit of a presentation. All right, we have our first presenter. All right, let's focus now.
Okay. Hi. Okay. So we discussed improving welfare of broilers in an informal economy like India. Now, this is a very our process and our intervention is at a very crude stage because that's how far along we got. But this is what we thought. We went with the SHG model, the self-help group model, because that has worked for a lot of interventions in India. So we went with that model, and also we had a majority of Indians in our group. So that's what we were familiar with. I think the first thing that we need to do when we're talking about broilers is understand the supply chain. So that's, and we're also conceptualizing it as an intervention that we have this imaginary organization, doesn't have a name yet, but our imaginary organization wants to implement this intervention in a particular part of, in a small area in the beginning. So the idea is to first visit the farms, first understand what the supply chain looks like, because that's the first step. So we understand the supply chain, and then we see what parts of it can be streamlined. Once we've identified, understood the supply chain really well, we start visiting the farms, and we identify where are the welfare gaps in these farms. Then we design our intervention, but as an organization, our key role here would be to build capacity and not do everything ourselves. So our role is to make the farmer self-sufficient in what they do. So this would mean us identifying, training farmers to first identify what schemes they can benefit from. Countries like India, which have strong governments, often have most developing countries in Asia have certain schemes, certain policies of the government that encourage animal agriculture in some form. So our goal is for them to benefit from these schemes while ensuring that the animals they are raising are raised in higher welfare conditions. So once we help them identify schemes they can benefit from. We identify a target market for them, and we capacity building is, I think, what we understood as the key gap that we can fill. But okay, I think that's so. We were looking at helping them partner with corporates. So even in informal economies, certain parts are very corporatized, and yes, we will help them negotiate their contracts with these markets, and that's what we came up with. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask another group, another brave leader from another group to come up, please. I'm going to come out there and pick one of you. All right? All right, all right. Come, Vivek. Excellent.
Hi, so we chose the empowerment through SHGs as well. And our problem was fishermen struggling to find fish because of the lack of fish due to overfishing, a lot of reasons, pesticide use, antibiotic use, fish getting released from aquaculture and messing up the ecosystem, and climate change, a lot of reasons. And one of the innovative solutions that we came up is a completely new agricultural practice, which is seaweed farming. And we talked about promoting tourism to promote the seaweed products and thinking about innovative ways of coming up with other products to replace seafood, so probably some other seaweed products, and of course capacity building with the local farmers, training, community engagement, and specifically to target the local problem that has to do with the lack of fish. We also talked about creating like smaller and better welfare fisheries and environmental friendly practices in aquaculture, and social media awareness as well to like promote the seaweed farming and also to raise awareness on the overfishing problem. So yeah, we came up with a lot of different solutions, so I'm not sure if we did this the right way. So yeah, that's all I have to share. Thanks.
All right. I'm Vivek. I'm representing that last round there. Yep. So we kind of came up with an organization name and everything that is outlined here. So our organization was established in 2021. It's called Tiny Shrimp, and we had a lot of impact. And I'm going to express what model we have taken and how it has helped the fish and the producers itself. So our main approach is on sustainable aquaculture practices and bringing out technology to this avenue. So we wanted to include the government and also the local communities to bring this intervention to the platform. And yeah, we also wanted to include technology and also include marketing capability to improve the welfare of fish and also, sorry, for the shrimp job. So yeah, the welfare of these individual shrimp and also for the people that are dependent on these organisms. So some of the impact that we have had over from 2021, is it the right number that I said? From 2021 till now is we brought out new technology to these communities. We've asked them to use artificial intelligence and also use carbon credits to improve their aquaculture practices and also to get a broad sense of how the new environment is working in around aquaculture. And we got an alternative protein source for the fish, for the feed that these shrimp are taking on. The alternative proteins that are made out of, not by the fish kills that are, not fish kills, what are those? The fish that are, okay, done. Yeah. So the fish that have been taken out from the seas and which are used as a feed for the shrimp. So we have made a change on building an alternative protein source for this shrimp. Overall, we had good impact and hope we run for the next 25 years.
Hello everyone. So our solution is based on the case study on Copernic. So basically we are trying to solve the problem created by freshwater fish farming and shrimp farming. Okay. So the problems I have categorized into two aspects. Let's say environmental problems and socio-economic problems. So in case, like let's discuss environmental problems first. So intensive freshwater farming can involve a lot of waste generation. And it can involve a lot of use of chemicals, right? Which is causing like massive algal bloom. And again, it involves a loss of mangrove forests as well. So again, like there is no other way to put it but to say that it is causing huge environmental destruction. But to think of it from a socio-economic perspective, it is also causing a lot of problems to the farmers as well because they don't have a lot of leverage in deciding the pricing. So our solution is to create a cooperative society of farmers and providing them training and knowledge on how exactly they are supposed to do it in an ecologically sustainable way. and humane, obviously. Like, as we are animal rights activists or animal welfareists, that is the primary point of concern for us. Okay, so, and again, like if you say, how exactly are we supposed to structure it, or how exactly are we supposed to make this cooperative society sustainable, and without putting too much of a financial burden on them, we can do one thing. We can just, instead of charging them upfront, we can, create a system in a way that they can be charged on a percentage basis, on the basis of the sales, which might decrease the burden again. And we can also create a democratized e-marketplace. I'm not sure if it happens in the rest of the world, but in India, what happens is the farmers have this like marketplace where they can sell the products directly. Okay, all right, just 30 minutes. They can sell directly to the customers at the end. So it's farm to fridge kind of a thing. So that is something that can be implemented. And again, in the world of e-commerce and in the digital world, it's getting much, much easier. And the digital penetration, internet penetration is so much. So I believe it's not only practical, but scalable as well. That being said, that's like the short way of putting my solution. Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharan, and my group is the one that's just in the middle circle over there. And the specific issue that we decided to focus on today was broiler chicken welfare in the Philippines. Now, as a lot of you might already know, the Philippines is a country which has a heavy meat consumption, and I guess our kind of a barrier to the outcomes we want to achieve, and those outcomes are achieving bigger spaces for our chickens, implementing more free-range farming, having the chickens have allocated times of day where they're able to go out and just be free. Some of those barriers are the consumers, one, aren't very informed, or they're very indifferent to the issue because it's a heavy meat-eating culture. And two, the producers are not incentivized. So kind of how do we overcome those barriers? Some solutions that we decided to implement were, there was some research that was done that showed that middle-class consumers, who are the largest consumers of chicken in the Philippines, are willing to spend more money when they know that the chickens are of higher quality and that they don't have any antibiotics, they're more organic. And free-range farming is one of those things that can be marketed or promoted to say that the chickens are healthier and they're of higher quality. So we can reach consumers that way. How do we incentivize producers? So in the Copernic example of Indonesia, they set up model farms in their case study. And one of the things that the Philippines can implement, or that activists in the Philippines can do, is to encourage to set up local farms where they implement these methods for chickens and create more free-range practices. Improving education in schools is definitely another thing. And one other solution that we came upon is midday meal programs, and that is reaching out to the producers and distributors of these meal programs to make sure that their meals include chicken that's free range. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
We've unfortunately run out of time. If anyone's left out, I apologize for that. But this is what I want you to take away from this workshop, that there are more approaches out there than the ones we've been, we've been super familiar with. It is super important to consider these things. You might not be able to get a premium price, but you can cut down on the size of the supply chain to increase the margin that the producer gets, right? And that would be enough of an incentive, in most cases, for the producers to consider these things. You could be essentially looking at a model where you set up model farms, basically, in some cases, like familiarizing people with a new production technique could be the bottleneck that you need to overcome, basically. I would encourage you to think more about local success stories going forward And it's not just important to understand these success stories, but you need to understand the intricacies of how they operate. It is in those little details where our success to use their model or being unable to use their model lies, basically, right? So learn more, shadow these people as much as we shadow each other in the movement. It is an exercise that at FWI we love to do. Most of our people go out to other organizations and shadow colleagues from other organizations. I'd encourage you to go to one of these sustainable ag spaces or self-help groups and say, hey, I want to shadow you for a day. Do that as frequently as you can. Learn from these things. And the animals in Asia deserve a lot more. They're here in bigger numbers, basically, than we're able to offer currently. And I think with this, we could begin the first step towards doing that. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everybody.